Okay, I want to welcome our speakers, panelists, and audience members to another discussion. We have three distinguished guests, and the three people I respect, admire, and love. First person, we have Olga Bednarski. We have Paul Brocklehurst and Peter Louw. I'm going to ask each panelist to address within 10 minutes, two questions. The first question is, how do you see stuttering? And the second question is, how do you see treatment? However, if you have something else pre-planned, you're not restricted, you can do so. Feel free to use slides. I can make you host and you can use your slide, and yeah, and I hope to have an informative discussion. Now, I'm going to ask speakers to speak in a certain order, alphabetical order of names. So there's no importance. All three speakers are equally eminent. So, when it comes to the order, I would like to start with alphabetically. It'd be Olga Bednarski. So just a little bit about our speaker, which I will in a second. I will just introduce. Okay. So what Olga has said to myself was, I promote an alternative holistic method of overcoming speech anxiety via working with the mindset and changing your relationships with the self, other people, and the world. The process involves self-exploration and can produce a profound therapeutic effect, helping individuals to overcome speech anxiety as well as many other emotional issues. My method is not a magic pill. However, it requires self-discipline, dedication, and most importantly, a genuine desire to change. Without any more further ado, I'm going to hand over the mic to Olga.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for inviting me to this meeting. I can see some faces I've seen before somewhere else, so it's very nice to have some support, hopefully today as well. So the first question was, how do I see stuttering? Well, I have studied stuttering for the past 13 years already. When I began this exploration, I was a severe stutterer, so I couldn't even say my own name at the time, and life was really difficult for me. I couldn't find a job, so basically, you know, I was paralyzed, so I had to do something about it. And after all these explorations, what is stuttering? Stuttering is an adaptation. It's an adaptation technique, or it's like a defense mechanism that you have. It all comes from childhood, so it all starts from there somewhere. Some people develop stuttering at the age of 3 or 5. Some, develop like at, maybe 10 or 12, like myself. But it doesn't matter when you developed it. It's still an adaptation technique, and it's an emotional problem. Also, I believe it's a disconnection, from yourself, because people who stutter, they tend to suppress their feelings and emotions. And when you learn to suppress your feelings and emotions, you don't hear yourself. you don't really know who you are. You get disconnected. And when you get disconnected, the world is a very scary place. And every person that you speak to, they seem very, very scary and judgmental and and very big, and you are very small in comparison to them, of course. And also because you are disconnected from your feelings, kind of you don't really grow. You don't grow and emotionally. So you can be 20, 30, 40, 50, doesn't matter how old, but inside you still a child. And the child that is inside is very, very scared. And it's scared of being punished, of the who can punish you? It's the people, of course. Anybody that you meet, can be, can punish you. And the world seems like a very scary place. It's not safe to be in this world. So, and this way people continue living until, like one day they decide, I've had enough. It's time to do something about it. And this is how the process begins. I know that people do look for some magic pills and, some quick techniques. But unfortunately, what my experience shows that those magic pills, they don't really exist. And even if they do work, the effect is usually short term. So it doesn't last. Um, it doesn't really last. So yeah, so techniques are good maybe for the start, but if you really want to, change your life, not just your speech, because it's not just about your speech, it's about your life, it's about knowing who you are. So if you wish to really change your life, you would need to go a little bit deeper than just your speech and, trying to fix your blocks and stuff like that. So the second question was, how do you see treatment? So the treatment would be learning to love yourself and, finding a way to reconnect with those feelings and emotions. Because also why I talk so much about feelings and emotions, it's because I find from my experience of you know um, working with people is that people are afraid of their emotions and feelings. It's like the most scary thing, to feel, to really reconnect and feel. It's the scariest thing. So people try to but if you really wish to heal, you would need to face your own feelings and everything that is inside. And this is the only way how you can reconnect. And once you start feeling, life begins to change. It really becomes, so much kind of more colorful. And I mean, it has so much to offer. If you don't feel anything, I mean, life is pretty boring. So once you begin to feel and
أها.
understand yourself,
أيوه هي.
yeah, is the, is that a question or something? Sorry. Yeah, so I'll just continue, I guess. So once you begin to feel and understand who you are, understand your needs and feelings and desires and wishes, then you learn to love yourself. And once you love yourself, it means that you can become your own best parent. Once you become your own supportive parent, you no longer need to ask permission, from other people. Please, can I say something online? Can I start my own channel? Please, am I good enough? Please, can you give me permission? I mean, you no longer need that because you are the one who can support and love yourself. You no longer, seek that permission from outside. And also, I know people who stutter, they are very perfectionist people. They try to be so perfect. I mean, it's just, it's so tiring as well when you try to always be perfect and nice, just to be liked and loved. So yes, once you learn to love yourself, your perfectionism will just go down, and life becomes so much easier then. Because you don't need to prove anything to anybody anymore. It just gives you so much freedom. And yeah, so that's the magic of it. Yeah, so stuttering is a disconnection, it's an emotional problem, and it's an adaptation. And it's not a disease, so it can be changed, it can be healed, uh, any way that you wish to call it. That's my presentation. Thank you very much.
Well, that was very interesting, yeah, and I really resonated with what you said. Any questions for Olga? Just put your hand up or whatever, or just this way or virtually. Peter.
Uh, um, Hi, Olga. It's been it's very nice to see you in person. I've read your book, which I found excellent, very interesting. There's one question which I would like, which is important for me personally. How would you do you think it is possible for a person of age, of some age, because I'm 74. Do you think it's possible for me to completely get healed by so that I no longer have this stuttering problem, or is it only for people who are not so old who can actually be healed?
I believe that you can learn to love yourself at any age. It doesn't matter how old you are. It's never too late to start loving yourself and actually understanding what it means. Because I know there are many books written on the topic, but still even more questions are coming my way, and people ask me, but what does it actually mean? How can you help me to love myself? So this is where I come in, and I kind of I guide people to kind of becoming more loving and supportive and understanding towards themselves. It's a process. It's not going to happen in just one day. But if that's what you wish to learn to do, if you wish to learn to give yourself love, then you can start at any age. It doesn't matter how old you are now. But it would need to go beyond speech, because I don't really focus on speech in my practice that much. Because the speech is just a byproduct of your lack of self-love, and that disconnection that comes from the lack of self-love. So as you learn to love yourself and understand yourself, your speech will improve. But I would just like to say that it's not going to happen in just a few days. It will take some time. Yes.
Okay,
Okay.
that was an excellent question, and also a very good answer. I think someone else is trying to attend, so I'm gonna quickly see where it is. Yes, sorry, a question from Tino. Sorry.
Yeah, sure. Great speech. So, my question to you is, how long it how long it it took to you until you got to the stage where you could say that you are overcome the problem? And yeah, so how long was the
How long
process? Yeah.
was the process? Well, it all started from me understanding that stuttering is not a speech problem. When I believed that there was something wrong with my speech, I would still block, I would still have to control it, and it didn't really work for me. But once I got it that, okay, hey, there is something else at play, and I started working with my feelings, with my emotions, with my perceptions of myself, of people, of the world. It took me approximately, I can't remember exactly, but I think it was somewhere around maybe 10 months, something like that. So it doesn't have to be long. It doesn't have to be like, I don't know, so many years. Yeah, so about 10 months, something like that.
Thanks a lot for the answer. Yeah.
Yes, but also I would just like to add here that I was very disciplined. I would do, lots of work on myself. So it wasn't like, okay, so I will do, 30 minutes on a Monday morning. That's it. It was every single day. There was no break. There was no day off. It was every single day. So that's hopefully my answer will help you.
Okay. All right. Next speaker is Paul Brocklehurst. It's a bit about Paul. Paul began stuttering at the age of 3 and had ongoing speech therapy throughout childhood. He finally got his stuttering under control in his early 40s, after which he went on to study speech therapy and psycholinguistics and finally completed his PhD researching the relationships between speech errors, perfectionism, and stammering. Paul is also a published author and director of the Stammering Self-Empowerment Program, which offers a free online course for people who stammer. And over to you, Paul.
Okay. Let me just have a... So first of all, thank you, Hassan, for inviting me. And it's great. I attended the talks that happened a couple of days ago and thoroughly enjoyed listening to the speakers and hearing the questions that were asked. So yeah, it's great that you're doing this. Okay, so I'll dive straight in to answering these questions. And I actually want to start with my definition, my working definition of stuttering. Okay, so I personally would define stuttering as the experience of knowing exactly what words you want to say and finding yourself unable to say them when you try to do so. So at the moment you try to say those words, you block. Now, one thing that has sort of interested me for many years, and I think this is a really important question, is if you take that definition of stuttering, it seems to me like everybody, and by everybody I mean everybody, stutters occasionally. So by that I mean that everybody occasionally has this experience of knowing exactly the words they want to say, and yet finding themselves unable to say those words at the moment when they try. So if that's the case, I think we sort of have to distinguish, or it's useful to distinguish between the sort of stuttering that everybody does, and what you might call a stuttering disorder or a stuttering problem. And so stuttering can be considered a disorder or a problem when, well, let me put it this way, stuttering or the fear of stuttering has a significant negative impact upon a person's ability to thrive and to fulfill their potential. And if it does, then it's a problem. So it seems to me that a stuttering disorder or problem involves a combination of two things. One is the fear of stuttering, or maybe rather the fear of blocking. And the other are unhelpful behaviors that we've learned in response to that fear. So these are generally considered to be secondary symptoms. So things like avoidance and escape behaviors. And these symptoms are learned, and they arise as a result of our desire not to block, our desire to avoid blocks or to escape from blocks. So I'd like to ask a question. Well, I'll ask a question and I'll answer it as well. Why do we not want to block? Well, it's worth thinking about this because to a certain extent it seems obvious, but I would say that we don't want to block because we perceive blocks as undesirable. And also because we believe, or most stutterers believe, that normal speakers who don't stutter, don't block. But also, we don't want to block, or we perceive blocks as undesirable because we block too often. And we block in situations where it would be better not to block. Now, I think that's really important to understand because a bit like Olga pointed out earlier, blocking, stuttering, in some ways is a sort of protective response. It's a juvenile way, in a way, of protecting us from some sort of danger or harm. So people tend to block in situations that remind them of instances where their speech elicited negative or hostile responses from the people that they were speaking to, or maybe where their speech resulted in communication failure. So blocking is a body's way of protecting us from such negative responses, but it's a sort of naive way, in a way. It's a very basic way. It protects us by preventing us from speaking. And as William Parry said a couple of days ago, it's like a freeze response. I also see it in that way. So this raises the question, before we started stuttering, did we have more negative speaking experiences than people who don't stutter? And if so, why? Well, I think there are lots of possible reasons why. Perhaps our speech when we were young was hard to understand. Maybe due to some other underlying disorder, something like poor articulation or clumsiness, dyspraxia. Perhaps our speech was often inappropriate when we were young, and perhaps it annoyed people. This is very common, for example, in children who have ADHD, where for a start they speak way more than other children usually, and also because they don't really have the capacity to focus on what other people say and to listen to other people. Often their speech is inappropriate. And so it gets annoying to their listeners, and so their listeners respond negatively to it. And I might add that research shows that a large percentage of people who stutter, maybe up to 50%, have a history of ADHD. So that's a possibility. But perhaps there was a problem not with our speech, but with our listeners. Hostile listeners, anxious parents, deaf listeners, listeners with unreasonable expectations, perfectionistic listeners. Or perhaps the environmental conditions in which we were brought up were not helpful. Perhaps we lived in a family where there was constant noise, where the television was on all of the time, and people couldn't easily hear us. Perhaps there were lots of other children and everybody was competing to speak, and too many distractions. And also perhaps because we were highly sensitive, or because we are highly sensitive, and so more prone to notice listeners' negative responses. So these are all things that, when it comes to treatment, I think it's really useful to bear in mind. So let me go on to the second question now. So how do I see treatment? Well, of course, it reflects my own experiences of having had a lifetime of treatment and trying to treat myself as well. What appeals to me is I like the idea of helping people to educate themselves about stuttering so that they can become their own therapists. And there are many aspects to this, but one of the important aspects that feeds into what I said earlier on, I think it's really important for us to develop a more helpful understanding of blocks and the role that they play in communication. So an understanding of those moments when there's something stops us from saying the words that we want to say. And I think if we can develop this understanding that blocking is essentially a protective response, and that blocks are not intrinsically bad, that can be very, very useful to us. So if you could imagine people who don't stutter, when they block, it doesn't disturb them. They don't feel like there's a problem there. But generally speaking, they tend to block in situations where speaking would potentially get them into trouble. And often, and they're conscious of this fact, that those moments when they can't get their words out afterwards, they're often very pleased that they didn't get their words out, because if they had, they might have regretted them. With us, it's become an issue because we block more often, and we do block in situations where it would be better not to block. But if we can understand more about blocking and the role that it plays, that could help us to become less afraid of it, less afraid of blocking. And if we can become less afraid of blocking, then the frequency with which we block will reduce. But it's important also to understand that it's not necessary, and it's not even desirable, to eliminate blocks entirely. That actually we just need to block less, but not stop blocking completely. So part of therapy then might involve, for example, exploring why we block too often. Was there some sort of underlying disorder that I might have had when I was a child? And if so, is that still there? Was I excessively perfectionistic? am I still excessively perfectionistic? And if so, why? What is perfectionism all about anyway? Why do people want to be perfect? And again, that feeds in a little bit to what Olga was saying about loving yourself and the need to love yourself and to have a stable sense of self-esteem. What about other people's hostile and anxious reactions to us, to our early speech attempts when we were young? I remember distinctly in my family, my mum, well, to put it into perspective, I'm the second child, so I have an older sister, and she started speaking very early, and she was very articulate right from a really early age. I was not so quick to learn to speak, and I was not so articulate, and I always had a blocked nose and hearing problems, which may well have meant that my speech was difficult to understand. So situations like that could well have fed into me forming the belief that speaking is difficult, that I have to put a lot of effort into it, and being afraid of hostile listeners' reactions, or simply being afraid that people won't understand me, or people will be upset when I speak. Like my mum used to get very upset when she saw me struggling to make myself understood. So hostile responses from other people, anxious responses, especially anxious responses from parents, competition between siblings, all sorts of things like that. They could easily contribute to the development of stuttering. And then what about the environment? So what was it like when I was brought up? Was it that there was lots of background noise, everybody talking at the same time, television always on? And what is the situation that I'm in now? And what do I do? How do I react to that? Do I have a sort of idealistic approach that says, well, I should be able to speak without stuttering, no matter how difficult the environment is? So if I go into a noisy restaurant and everybody's talking, and should I try to speak above all of that and try to keep going anyway? Or is it better just to let go and wait till there's less background noise and things like that? Yeah. These are things that I think we need to think about. And so, yeah, another question is, what about unhelpful secondary symptoms that we might have developed? For example, the tendency to push, to force words out, or the tendency to avoid, make abnormal movements also. There's lots and lots of different things. My feeling is that often, even when our self-esteem has improved and when the external circumstances have improved, often we're held back simply by these habits that we've developed, these secondary symptoms that cause us to continue to struggle even when we don't have to struggle anymore. So I think sometimes it is worth and it is important to work on the secondary symptoms. And of course, sometimes, probably more often than not, it's important to work on self-esteem and loving yourself. Okay, I don't know how many minutes I've gone on for there, Asan.
It's okay, it's okay. I think it was about 15, but it was...
I better stop, hadn't I? Right, okay.
It's okay, it was fascinating. And you know, I always say that, you know, these discussions just scratch the surface. And and I'm hoping in future I can have I can have an I can have an individual one-on-one with audience as well. Okay. First of all, any question for Paul? Sorry, Son. Yeah.
Hi, Paul. Thank you so much for sharing. It's very thought-provoking. As I understand, I think you dive very deep to the reasons of stuttering. So may I understand your approach is not so focused on the treatment, like what we do, but by understanding what's underlying our stuttering, actually it can get improved.
That's true. Yeah. So generally speaking, I would say that most people who have a stuttering problem harbor quite a few false and unhelpful beliefs about the nature of stuttering and what causes it. And well, yes, mainly what causes it. And to the extent that one can learn about stuttering, and also the things around stuttering, so about human psychology in general, really, that can really help us to overcome those and to change those unhelpful beliefs. I mean, one of the things that really helped me, although I have to admit I started doing it after my stuttering had stopped being a problem, but nevertheless, it helped stabilize and make me more confident, was actually going and studying speech therapy. And I remember when I was studying this, I was thinking, oh, I just wish that all people who stutter could actually go to university to study speech therapy. Because if they did, they would learn so much about speech, language, communication in general, that it would really help them. And so when I finally finished my stint at university, one of the things I wanted to do was to actually create an online course where people could do exactly that, because I spent a couple of years teaching the stuttering module in one of the speech therapy degrees at a university up in Edinburgh. And while I was doing that, I thought these notes that I've made for my teaching, it'd be really useful to make them available to everybody. And so that's what I've done. And so I created this thing called the Stammering Self-Empowerment Program, which is basically educational. So yeah, education, understanding stuttering is really important, I think.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. If no more questions, we can move on to the final speaker, Peter Louw. So, Peter Louw is an author and poet, who lives in the beautiful city of Cape Town, South Africa. Trained as a lawyer and admitted as an advocate, he nevertheless found that his stutter made it difficult to follow this career, and instead became a journalist and translator. His books include a collection of poems and 2 books on stuttering, the latest being Stuttering as a Mind-Body Disorder, which is also the name of his Facebook group. He also has a blog titled Stutter Sense, with page views approaching 500,000. Peter believes that stuttering is one of many mind-body disorders, and that we who stutter can learn much from how other mind-body disorders are treated. Over to you, Peter.
Thank you very much, Asan, for this opportunity. Okay, the first question. I see stuttering as a mind-body issue. Now, so what is a mind-body issue? Well, very simply, a mind-body health problem is an issue which is generated by the mind and then manifests in the body. Now, mind-body disorders are in a bit of a gray area because traditionally in the medical world, we have this big division between the mind on the one hand and the body on the other. This is a very fundamental separation with doctors and other professionals and speech therapists on the one hand, and psychologists on the other. As a result, there is this no man's land between these two industries. A no man's land which has generally been neglected. And most doctors and psychologists do not really feel comfortable when going into the no man's land. Fortunately, there are exceptions, and one exception was an endocrinologist, Dr. Hans Seeley, who became known as the father of stress. He was a pioneer because he was able to bridge this big gap between mind and body. Through his research, he was able to prove that the mind can significantly affect the body. His research, as you all know, ultimately led to our concept of the stress response, well known as the fight, flight, freeze, and fawn response. And probably yeah, in the beginning, I think it was just the first three, and then the fawn came in. No, it was first the first two, fight and flight, then the freeze, well, was ultimately discovered, then the fourth one, the fawn too. And there may be others too in future. Fact is, these 4 F's, the fight, flight, freeze, fawn response, is a mind-body response. And since then, there has been much more research in this field. There are, in fact, many mind-body disorders. Well-known one is irritable bowel syndrome, and various other digestive issues. And I have had experience of some of them. It seems that, in fact, the digestive system in particular is prone to stress. But many unexplained chronic pains also seem to be of a mind-body origin, because muscles especially tend to contract excessively because of tension. But these issues, they have one thing in common. Some type of stress and tension, anxiety, or whatever you call it, is involved. So as you can hear, my focus is on stress. Stress is this, what we are all about with stuttering. It's in my view, stress plays a huge role. There are so many forms of stress. It can be conscious. Some of the stress we feel is subconscious, so that we are actually unaware of what of all the tensions that are going on inside the mind. Now, we all know that stress does play a role in stuttering. So the question naturally arises, is stuttering also a mind-body disorder? And if so, it means that stuttering is not a stand-alone health problem, but it's part of a much wider family of disorders. This point came to me after I experienced a few other mind-body issues, and I then began to think, is stuttering also a mind-body disorder? And I think it is, and that explains so many things. It kind of opens a horizon of possibilities, because if yeah, okay, maybe I should first say, is stuttering also a mind-body issue? Are the muscles of the vocal cords affected by stress and tension, so that they freeze as part of the freeze stress response? And I think Paul mentioned it. I think Bill on Sunday also mentioned that. I tend to agree with them. Indeed, I believe that some kind of constriction in the larynx, that is in the throat, due to excessive tension, is the physical root of our problem. But that is only the physical part. There's also this mind part. The stress and tension creates a constriction in the throat. And that really makes it, in a sense, makes it much more simple. We have to think of our problem being stress in some ways, maybe subconscious, but it is constricting our throats. And from the constriction starts all these repetitions, prolongations, secondary behaviors, stamping a foot and making funny moves. Sometimes that is only to distract the mind away from the original block, which is in the throat. So if we can solve the constriction in the throat, we should be able to become fluent, which is, of course, easier said than done. Yeah, so as I said, I think that we who stutter can learn so much from how other mind-body issues are handled. I will name few methods that have helped me, but it's yeah. I must just say that I'm now in this second part. I'm talking about the actually therapy and what we can done about it. It's important to understand that also within the mind-body world, there is at the moment not a single one method that will help everybody. we have to try different things and choose those which help us individually the most, and so develop our own toolbox of tools. One basic principle in my therapy, which has helped me, is actually self-evident. It's if stress plays such a big role in stuttering, it makes sense that stress management can be very useful.
Seems that Peter is frozen, I guess.
Yes,
Or-
it looks like it, yeah. It looks
Oh,
like
yeah.
Peter is,
No, it's not me frozen.
well, it's Peter's frozen. Oh, I don't know, maybe I'll drop my message. Until then, does anyone have a question for both Olga and Paul? And if anyone has a question, they can ask, and then Olga and Paul can answer.
Actually, if you don't mind, I have a question to Olga and actually to Peter as well. So,
Maybe Paul.
because I wanted to ask about again, maybe Peter will get to the point of suppressed emotions, but that's the topic I hear a lot from him. So I want to ask him. And Olga, you said that it's a great idea to open up to your feelings and to connect to yourself. And also you said to love yourself. I personally can share that in my childhood, I kind of loved myself, but there was a moment where I fell in love first. And I remember how I got scared of this feeling and kind of,
Oh, hi.
oh, sorry.
Hi.
I think you're frozen, Peter. That's fine.
Hi.
Peter, if you just hold your thought, because at the moment, Andre is asking a question to Olga and Paul. So as soon as they're done, we can bring you back in. Is that okay?
Sure, sure.
And actually, if you don't mind, I also want to ask Peter as well,
Yeah.
because Peter uses the term suppressed emotion. So is that the thing that I'm describing, or that's a totally different thing? So what I'm saying is that at some point when it was 10 years old, I fell in love first and I got scared of this feeling. And I kind of forbid myself to let this feeling, to have this feeling. So, and I see that as a big event in my life that translated into different things in adulthood. But my question to Olga and to Peter is, for Olga, maybe what is the way to really connect to yourself and to let, how you said, to open up to your feelings? Is there any way to any ways how to do that? And maybe to Peter, is this the example of suppressed emotions, or that's a different thing in your view?
How do you reconnect with your feelings? This is the question. So reconnecting with your feelings, first of all, having new experiences, it definitely helps. Because people who have anxieties, different kinds of anxieties, actually, they tend to be quite closed off. You know, they avoid having new experiences. They avoid meeting new people. And even if they do go to meet new people, it's kind of, you know, they just perform. They're not being fully themselves there. You know, they are trying to be nice. They want to impress. Maybe they try not to start. Maybe they go there just to practice their speech. That's what I used to do. You know, I just went to meet people just to practice my speech. You know, this was my goal. But I didn't really connect with them because I was afraid to connect with them. And I didn't enjoy talking to new people. I didn't enjoy interaction because I was so closed off inside, and my heart was closed. I was afraid of judgment, and once you begin to open up, and this only happens when you start to feel who you are. When you start to reconnect with your feelings, with your desires, with your needs, then you start to have this feeling that it is actually safe to be yourself now. You are starting to feel safe to be yourself, and you start to feel safe to be with people and to talk to them and to really connect with them, not just be focused on your speech alone. So this is how you kind of begin to reconnect with your feelings and with yourself as the result. So having new experiences, meeting new people, and when you go to new people, don't just focus on trying not to stutter, because otherwise you're going to block the experiences of enjoying talking and interacting with these new people. So focus instead of just being yourself and listening to those people, you know, kind of getting to know them, I guess.
Thank you
So
so much. That's
that's just
beautiful
one
advice.
answer. Just yeah,
Mhm.
this is just
Yeah.
the start.
Beautiful.
Okay, you're welcome.
Yes, Andre, yeah, when you talk about repression, I know that the psychologists say that there is a difference between repression and suppression. Repression is actually a subconscious activity, whereas suppression is where you do it consciously. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but it seems to me that our problem is really one of repression. Is that we are when we ignore certain things, ignore or push it aside without actually facing it, then it can amount to repression. But if you consciously push away something, then it's actually not a problem.
Yeah, so probably in my case, it was repression, because I understood that many, many years afterwards, somehow retrospectively. So from my adult, you know, knowledge and perspective, but as a child, that was probably unconscious, as you say. Thank you so much, Peter.
Okay.
Paul, do you want to have this question?
Well, there's just one thing I'd like to add to those comments, and that is that I think an important part of being able to accept whatever emotions are there, not to repress or suppress them, either way, is to recognize that every emotion has its place. We have a tendency in our culture to think that some emotions are good and some emotions are bad. So we have a tendency to automatically presume that things like love and joy and happiness are good, and anger and fear and dread and things like that are bad. I think in order to really be able to open up to everything that's there, one has to go beyond making value judgments like that, and to recognize that they all have their place, and that none of them are inherently good or inherently bad. They just are what they are. My way of reaching that point has been through meditation, and a lot of the practice that I've done in meditation has been simply to observe the emotions that arise, not to try to push them away or not to cling on to them, but simply observe them. And as one observes them, one becomes more appreciative that each of them plays a role, and that they all have their place. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Peter, would you like to finish your presentation off?
Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I don't know what happened. That actually the same thing happened on Sunday, that after about 40 minutes or so, my internet just broke down, or my internet connection. I don't know what happened, but anyway, yeah. But like I said, there are many things that fall under stress management, such as meditation, prayer, yoga, philosophical belief systems such as Buddhism and mindfulness. Apart from this spiritual value which these practices bring, they are, from a psychological viewpoint, also extremely beneficial. And that's because they make us feel safe. They provide comforting answers to age-old existential questions that otherwise tend to unnerve people and make them more stressed. Other mind-body principles are expressiveness and assertiveness. This is based on the concept that subconscious repression plays a big role in mind-body problems. Repression entails that many people ignore and bury emotions such as anger, fear, and sadness. They bury this deep in their subconscious mind, because they regard such emotions as unacceptable. But doing so is psychologically very unhealthy, because such repressed emotions create all kinds of inner conflict. And it is believed within the mind-body world that such repressed emotions could be a driving force in stuttering and other mind-body issues. So it makes sense to counteract these stresses by becoming aware of them and letting them out in a healthy and socially appropriate manner, such as writing about them as part of the therapeutic method known as journaling. When I feel particularly angry or sad or so, I write about it and then afterwards delete what I have written, so as to get it out of my system. But this is why expressing ourselves is so important. Let those emotions out. Do not hold back. Expressiveness can actually be done in many ways. a good body language, for instance, is part of being expressive. Using your hands, using your body, moving around, and also opening your, opening your body up to the world. Expressiveness can actually be done in many ways. I think this is one way why movie and theater actors who regard themselves as people who stutter do not stutter while acting. It's because acting is a highly expressive activity. People move around, they are emotional, they express themselves with their hands, with what they are saying. So yeah, I think this is in line with what Olga said. Get in touch with your emotions. That is so important. One more mind-body principle is do not obsess about your symptoms. Being obsessive about stuttering will simply make it worse, as obsessiveness sends a signal to the primitive brain that there is a problem. This will just result in a vicious circle. So don't focus on the physical stuttering. It is just the symptom. Rather try to identify the emotions that trigger the symptom. Other mind-body topics are the dangers of perfectionism and of not regarding yourself as broken. Those who say that this is a neurological problem, well, I've got my doubts about that, but that is a topic of some other day. And don't allow the stutter to intimidate you. That's where assertiveness plays a huge role. But when you do get blocks, accept it without panicking, and try not to have negative feelings about it, because if you react negatively, the brain will feel even more unsafe and will create more symptoms according to mind-body theory. If you don't worry about it, the brain also won't. Finally, finally, a word about fluency techniques. Personally, I also often use a fluency technique known as the passive airflow technique, which is part of my toolbox. It reduces the tension on my vocal cords. Sure, fluency techniques do have their limitations. They should be seen as symptomatic treatment only, but I find them very effective for surviving a presentation such as this one. In other words, I use both mind strategies and physical techniques such to manage my speech. And that's it. I hope this short overview has been helpful, and I'm very glad that I survived it. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay,
Goodbye.
but Peter, that was very interesting, very a lot of information. Any questions for Peter specifically?
And I hope there are no questions.
That's okay. Okay. Anyone got any questions for the panel just before we close up?
If we still have enough time, but it's late, so I'm not sure how
Well,
you
if you
stand
yeah,
with
no
time.
question. Anyway.
I have just one short for Olga and for Paul. So when you go back to your hard speech days time, you said that all people have a blocks. So what are the tools that you two try to use to go through the blocks, if there were any, or you just work on your emotional stuff and then the blocks just go
Ah.
go away? Yeah.
Okay. I used to use control. I tried to control my blocks, and I would use this specific type of breathing. So I would use breathing techniques to control my blocks. But these techniques weren't always successful. So it depended on how I felt inside. So how I felt about myself, about people, and the world. Some other techniques I used, I can't really remember. It was just trying hard to control my breathing, and that's how I controlled my blocks. That's all.
Okay, shall I say a few words? Two approaches for me. First of all, my first approach is not to try and control anything at all, but just to let the blocks happen, and to remind myself that it's okay to block, and to understand, and this has been part of why I think understanding more about stammering has been so helpful, that blocks do fulfill a role, and that they're not entirely pathological. So I allow myself to block, usually. And then when I find myself blocking, what I find is the most useful thing to do in most situations is just to completely give up trying to say the sound I can't say and just carry on with the rest of what it is I want to say. And so that might mean I try to say a sound. Usually the blocks start on the first sound of a word. So if I find I can't get that first sound out, I just give up trying and carry on with the rest of the word. 90% of the times a listener can understand what I was trying to say anyway. And when it doesn't work, I'm just pragmatic about it. If I blocked and I can't see the sound, what I don't do is I don't keep trying to say it. I mean, I might try once more, but not like keep on trying. If it's not going to come out, it's not going to come out. So anything that's practical is okay. You know, a lot of speech therapists would say the opposite, but I would say it's fine to use other words or to spell the word out often, because that can get you through. So there's all sorts of ways. And there's one other thing that I do, and this is more like a fluency shaping technique. There are some situations where it's really important not to block. The most obvious one is when you're talking to speech recognition software, like you've made a telephone call to your bank or to your electricity company, and you have to give some data or some account numbers and things like that. And if you block, the speech recognition software won't understand you. So you mustn't block. And the way I get around that is basically I use rhythm. And I have a particular rhythmic approach, which I call orchestral speech, which is a bit like singing, but without the melody. That works, and that gets me through situations like that. But it's very symptomatic. It doesn't help with overcoming stuttering overall, but it's really useful in those sort of situations. Yeah, okay. Hope that helps.
Okay. That's very useful. I think we should now bring to a close. I want to thank all speakers and audience. What is the best way to contact Olga, Paul, and Peter? Is it via your websites or email?
Yes, I have a website, stopmystutter.com.
Stopmystutter.com. I'm just going to put that in the chat so people can note that down. Stop. And just to let you know, I will. Sorry, www.stopmystutter.com. Yeah, we have a WhatsApp group. I think it was with 120 users, and I'll add this website onto that. And what's the best way to contact Peter and Paul?
Okay, so me, oh, Peter, you go first, Peter.
Oh, okay. Yes, I have a Facebook group called Stuttering as a mind-body disorder. So people can join that, and I also am part of a WhatsApp group.
Yeah.
Which yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
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 And I think you're also on the People with Stutter WhatsApp group as well. So you're on that as well. Paul?
Okay, so I have a I have a website. It's the best way is to get me through the website. So my email is on the website.
Okay.
But the website address, well, it's called the Stammering Self-Empowerment Program, or the SSEP. And the address is www.stammeringresearch.org. I'll just write this down now, yeah, and then I can forward it as a message.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. Could I also ask Andre, I didn't ask you this on Monday. What is your website? Because this is going to be on YouTube and people can hear.
My website is very easy to remember. Free from Stutter. That's the project that I run. That's the program that I run. Free from Stutter.
.com or .org .com.
.com. Yeah.
That's fine. Okay. Yes, this has been very enriching. Very enriching experience. And yeah, so much information. And also want to thank everyone who attended for listening and also for asking the questions. Okay, I hope everyone enjoys your evening and the rest of the week. And yeah, we'll just we'll end the recording from now.
Thank you so much.
Everyone.
Yes.
So great to see everyone. Thank you.